Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, has a bot problem. I saw this thread here made by some account that's also probably a bot because they tweet way too much. And they've got a couple of screenshots of a bunch of bot activity where bots are failing at doing whatever they're trying to do. Sorry, I cannot generate the requested content as it violates OpenAI's use case policy. So clearly they're using ChatGPT to publish tweets. And then you have a couple of other tweets where I assume this same person runs these other bots as well, are trying to get engagements to their tweet, so they're trying to reply with more ChatGPT generated tweets. And they're verified. So let's look at some more. I'm unable to provide the requested response, blah, blah, blah. I apologize, I'm unable to provide the requested response. It's all just a bunch of bots failing to generate their responses. Got a couple more here. One that straight up admits they're a machine learning model. Another one that's admitting they're a machine learning model. I guess ChatGPT was trained to say, oh, how delightful a lot. This person actually used ChatGPT way too much, so they ran out of the free $5 that they get when they first sign up, I guess. So they exceeded their current quota, and now this is the output that they decided to put. I used to run an account that would use ChatGPT to generate summaries of Department of Justice press releases. And one time, the bot tweeted something about fentanyl, and all of a sudden, this Celestia St. Clair retweeted and liked the tweet. So that got me wondering, who is this person? Why are they retweeting my nonsense tweets? Turns out they're a bot whose keywords to activate involve Elon Musk, Make America Great Again, fentanyl, and a couple of other right-wing talking points. This person has 36.2 thousand posts. Clearly they're not a real person. Let's take a look at who they follow. I guarantee most of these are also bots. California Christian Conservative, no respect for the left. Okay, they have 14,000 posts. They joined in 2009, so maybe somebody bought this account and decided to take it over, or their account got hacked. Or maybe they've been a bot from the start. But now all this account is used for is to just retweet a bunch of stuff that follows a clear agenda. It doesn't matter what side you're on, you could be on the right, you could be on the left. Both sides are using bots to manipulate social media so that the algorithms promote whatever they want to promote. And because of that, Twitter has just turned into garbage. So why do people pay for these blue checks if they're just going to end up using the account of the bot anyways? Well, the thing is, when you're a premium user, you could get paid to post based on the engagement that you receive in your posts, and you get reply boosts. So not only can you get paid for posting, but your posts get promoted harder than people who don't pay. So you might wonder, well, why doesn't Twitter put a stop to this? Why doesn't Elon Musk just take down the bots or make it harder to create bots? Well, if you're a public figure, wouldn't you want bots to just agree with every little thing, follow everything you do, agree, boost engagement so that you can be exposed to more eyes, more actual humans? Like all these Taylor Swift bots. Like, I'm sure some of them are real Taylor Swift fans, but I bet most of them are just paid by Taylor Swift or her people so that she can be a little more popular, she can take over social media, and she can just, in general, manipulate the conversation to steer her way. Like, if you had the money and the funds, why wouldn't you want to control your public perception, right? And why would Twitter put a stop to this? They get paid when bots decide to verify themselves. And it looks like Twitter's more popular than it is because all these verified bot accounts are generating activity that real people see. So of course the social media company isn't going to care. And if you want to create a bot network effectively, you're going to have to buy better API access so that you have access to better endpoints. You can tweet more times a month. You can pull more posts. And you can just overall manage your bot farm better. It costs $100 for a basic and $5,000 for pro. So not only is Twitter making money on people who decide they want to make bot accounts verified, but they're also making money on people who want to run a complex bot network because they have to pay for better API access to actually run those networks. I feel like at this point, the best thing to do is to just make Twitter so bad and so filled with bots that real people just stop going onto it. And finally, then Twitter or X will decide, okay, maybe we really do need to put a stop to this bot generated content because all of it is just garbage. And the problem is, it's just so easy to do it. So let me show you guys how to create a Twitter bot that uses a large language model so that you can generate fake posts. So you're going to need to go onto developer.twitter.com and you're going to need to sign up for free access to the X API. Once you do that, you got to create a project and you need to make sure that the project has read and write permission so that you can use your project keys to post on an account of your choice. Make sure you set it to a web app. The callback URI and the website URL don't really matter because we're just making a simple script right now. And then you're going to go over to the keys and tokens tab over here, and you're going to get your API key and your API key secret, and you're going to get your access token and your access token secret. Save all of it because you're going to need it later for the script. You're going to need to make sure you have Ollama downloaded as well. It's just a wrapper for a bunch of large language models so that you have one common interface to interact with different models. I'm using Linux, but you could do it on Mac or Windows. When you do it on Windows, you actually have to create a Windows subsystem of Linux virtual machine. I'd recommend, if you have the ability, just do it on Linux. It's just a lot easier. And then you're going to need to choose a model and download it. You'll know you've downloaded it successfully when you do Ollama help and you see that there are actual Ollama commands. To make sure you downloaded a model correctly, you can do Ollama run llama 2 uncensored, and then it should boot up. Hey, how are you? I'm doing well, thank you, and how about yourself? So that's the bot responding. So let's get to the script. So I've got a requirements.txt file here, and these are going to be the packages that I have to pip install, and these are the specific version numbers that I'll be using. The first thing we have in the script is we're going to want to get the model, the prompt, and the main tweet from the command line arguments. The model, because we need to know what model that we're going to be using with Ollama. The prompt, so that we can know what exactly to tell the model to do. So that could be something like, pretend you're a man who just had pizza for the first time and you loved it. Tell us your story. And then the main tweet will be the first tweet in the thread. So all the replies that the LLM generates will be based off of that. So it could be something like, hey, I just tried pizza for the first time. Click below to see my thoughts, or something like that. It could be whatever you want. And now that we have that, we can continue by figuring out how to create these tweets. So I'm going to create a class and we can get started on that. All right, so I've created a class called tweet generator. And right now what it does is when you're initializing it, you have to pass it in a model. We're going to be using that model to talk to Ollama so that we can figure out what we want to use. And then we want to give it some sort of prompt. So this generate response function over here accepts a prompt that then gets passed in over here. And as a response, we get back whatever the large language model decides to respond with. And what we'd do is we'd create an instance of the tweet generator over in the main function, and then we'd pass it in the prompt that was inputted in the command line arguments so that it could be fed through this so that we could generate a response. So if you don't have Twitter Premium, your tweets are limited by 140 characters. So if you want to build a thread, you have to make sure that each tweet in that thread is 140 characters or less. So right now, this prompt could generate a huge, massive paragraph, and we can't post all of that into one tweet, so we need to figure out how to break it out. I've created a function createTweetArray, and the idea of it is we're going to pass in the text into this function, and it's going to return a list of tweets, and then we're going to return the tweets back. So how does this function work? We're setting the max length to be 140 because that's going to be my max count because I don't have Twitter Premium, and then we want to split up the text into words. To do that, we're going to look for spaces and new lines, and we're going to use those as the separators so that if you pass in a sentence like, this man is happy, then it's going to split up that sentence into an array of length 4, and it's going to be this man is happy. Those are going to be the 4 entries. We're going to keep a tweets array to start off with. We're going to count the index, and this index correlates to the length of tweets. For each word in our text, if the length of the current tweet that we're building plus the word is less than the max length, then let's add that word into the index. So what that basically means is if this tweet had started off with this man is, and the next word in words was happy, then what this part right here would do is it would add a space and then the word. So after this part runs, in this loop, it would look like this. This man is happy. But what happens if this tweet reaches 140 characters? Then we need to create a second entry. So let's say the rest of it is happy, but now he's sad, right? So it'll see that the max length has been reached, and it'll go on to this next function. So we're going to increment index, and we're going to append the word to it. So let's say the next word is now. It's going to append now from this, and then it's going to continue on to the next iteration. So in the next loop, let's say the next word is he. So it's going to look at the word, is the max length reached? Well, now that we just created a new one, the max length hasn't been reached, so we could safely add the next word into the next tweet. So it would be like he, and then for the next loop, it would be is, and then for the next loop, sad, or whatever the tweet is, right? And so these entries in tweets are basically corresponding to one tweet so that we don't reach the character limit. I just wanted to give you a little visual. So just to run through it again, if you add a word to the tweet and it doesn't reach the max character length, then we could feel free to add the word to the tweet. Otherwise, let's start off by creating a new tweet with the word. Because the first tweet is going to have a space, we're just going to strip that so that we don't have an empty space to start off the tweet. And then we're going to return the result so that it can be returned over here on generate tweets. So another quirk about the Twitter API is, at least if you have the free version, you can only send about 50 tweets a day. So we need to make sure that we're not going to be generating 50 tweets at once. Or I guess we could do that, but we don't want to go over that limit because we don't want to have a scenario where tweets is returned and it's got like 60 tweets and we're going to be tweeting out an impartial list and then it just cuts off and we can't create any more tweets for the day. To make sure that we don't run into that issue, we need to check to see what the length of tweets is. All right, so I've established a thread limit as 50 over here. So if the length of tweets is greater than or equal to 50, then we want to throw an error so that we don't waste all our tweet budget. And the reason I'm doing greater than or equals to here is because we're going to be creating a main header tweet in a function later. So really we want tweets to be ideally 49 or less strings long. So we can actually be sort of smart about this, right? Because if you think about it, since we're using a large language model to create the prompt anyways, and if the response is too long, why don't we just ask it to create a shorter response? So now I've slightly modified the generate tweets function, and let's see what it does now. Let's say the length of the tweets is greater than the thread limit. We're going to create a new prompt saying make this body of text shorter, and we're going to pass it in the text that it originally generated. And then we're going to call generate tweets again. And I have this other variable here called iteration, because let's say we do run into a scenario where it can't possibly generate any shorter tweets. We just want to cut it off after, let's say, 5 iterations so that we're not spending all this computing power just to return nothing and we get stuck on an infinite loop. So this is known as recursion. And if we see that we've already attempted to shorten the text 5 times and it still doesn't work, then let's throw the error. But if length of tweets is longer than thread limit, let's try to shorten it by calling this function again so that generate response has to be called with our new prompt. So that's going to be the text that was already generated in the previous iteration. And we're just going to ask it to sort of summarize it so that it could be shorter. And then we're going to build a tweets array again. And then once again, we're going to check if length of tweets is lower than the thread limit. If it's not, we'll do it all over again. If it is, then we're just going to return the tweets array because we're ready to actually turn it into a tweet. So now that we have this recursive function done and the tweet generator completed, we can start working with the Twitter API. But first off, let's just initialize this generator. So I've got generator equals new generator, and we're going to pass it in the model that we got from the command line arg. And then for the generate tweets function, we're just going to pass it in the prompt that we got as well. So by doing this, we're going to call this generate tweets function. It's going to do all the recursion, the shortening, whatever it needs to, so that I could return us an array of strings that are 140 characters or less long so that we can then tweet it out. And as you may have seen, I've got tweet generator imported up here, and I've also imported another thing called Twitter API that we're going to build right now. So let's get to it. The Twitter API class is actually going to be super simple, and that's thanks to the package I'm using called Tweepy, and that allows you to interface with the Twitter API through a Python package. So in the init function, we're going to initialize the client. We need to make sure that our Twitter API key, the API key secret, the access token, and the access token secret are saved in our environment variables so that we can access it in this function. And if you want to, you could just make it plain text, but I don't want to show you my API keys or my access tokens, so I saved it to an environment variable. But you can just keep it at plain text if you really want to. You can think of the API key and the API key secret as, okay, this is the Twitter program that is being given authorization to access Twitter programmatically. And this is the user that's being allowed to access Twitter programmatically. So this user information is going to be what's used so that we can actually post a tweet on a specific username. And now I've created this super simple function called tweet thread, and it's going to take in the first tweet text, which is just going to be what the thread starts off with, and then a list of replies. So this is going to be the tweets array that we generated earlier. We're going to keep a last tweet ID so that we can reference it later. And we're going to start off by first calling self.client.createTweet, and we're going to give it first tweet text. So this could be, here's my story about how I ate pizza for the first time. And that's going to be the first tweet. This gets published, and we're going to save it to the variable first tweet because we want to get the ID from first tweet because we need it to generate the replies. We're going to save it to last tweet ID, and then we can start going through the array of tweets that we generated earlier by generating a reply tweet. So to do that, we just call create tweet again. We give it the text that we want to give it. So this is what was generated by the large language model. But unlike this first tweet over here, we're actually going to add a new parameter in reply to tweet ID, and we're going to give it the last tweet ID. So what this is effectively doing is whatever the last tweet ID is, which on the first iteration is just going to be our first tweet, we're going to make this reply tweet a reply to that last tweet ID so that it actually shows up in a thread and it's not just 50 separate tweets that are not linked together. And then once we do that, we're going to just change last tweet ID to be the tweet that we just created's ID so that in the next loop, we can do the same thing over again and it could be a reply to this second reply tweet rather than a bunch of tweets replying to this first tweet, because then that wouldn't create a thread. It would just create one post with a bunch of responses that are seemingly interlinked. But by doing this, we can create a nice linear thread on Twitter. Now that we have that, we could initialize the Twitter API. And, this could have been a case where I could have just created a simple function, but I kept it as a class just to be a little more object-oriented in case I ever want to expand it out and add more functionality to the Twitter API. But in this case, it was super simple. I'm just going to be initializing the Twitter API, which takes in no arguments. And then I'm going to call the tweet thread function, which takes our main tweet from the command line args, and then the list of tweets that we generated from generate tweets. So just to flow through this one last time, the user is going to input a model, let's say Llama 2 or Mistral, whatever you want. The next thing is it's going to be a prompt. So tell me a story about a man who ate pizza for the first time. That would be what's in prompt. And then the main tweet would be, here's this story about a man who ate pizza for the first time, and this would be the start of the tweet thread. We're going to initialize the generator by passing in the model so that it knows what to do. And then we're going to call the generate tweets function, which takes in the prompt that the user inputted and then generates tweets based off of that prompt. After that, we're going to initialize the Twitter API, which creates the client and establishes the client as an authorized user. And then we're going to call the tweet thread function that we just created with main tweet and tweets. So now that we've got all that complete, let's give it a run. So to call it, we just simply do python main.py, and now we got to pass in our command line arguments. So we could pass in any of the models in the Ollama library, and previously I've used Llama 2 and Llama 2 uncensored, but I found that Mistral is really good at storytelling, so for this video I'm going to be using Mistral. So make sure you have that on your local Ollama instance so that we can pass it in and it'll actually work. Alright, let's type in here Mistral. Alright, so now we just got to come up with a prompt. So let's tell Mistral to give it a story about a man who got hit by a drunk driver who turned out to be a celebrity and he wasn't drunk at all. I'm hoping this makes something weird, so let's see what happens. You're a man who just got hit by a drunk driver, but when you got out of your car, you found that it was a celebrity that you didn't know about, but you realized it because paparazzi came flooding into the crash site. tell me the story. And now we need to come up with a main tweet. So let's do, here's a story about how I got hit while driving by a celebrity. All right, now we can hit run and we can wait for it to process, and then let's check out what it looks like once it's finished. All right, so it's finished running. Let's go check out Twitter. So I've already been testing it out before just to make sure it works. Let's see what it just generated. Here's a story about how I got hit while driving by a celebrity. Title: Unplanned Encounter with Celebrity Fate. Introduction: The cool autumn wind played with the fallen leaves as I, John Doe, a humble and assuming citizen of Los Angeles, stepped out of my battered Honda Civic. The air was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. As I surveyed the damage to my car, my heart skipped a beat as I heard the telltale sound of clicking cameras. 2. Disbelief and confusion. What in the world? I muttered under my breath, squinting into the darkness as an army of paparazzi emerged from the shadows. They were snapping away from a frenzied abandon, their flashbulbs illuminating the chaotic scene before them like a grotesque tableau. And it goes so on and so forth. So one thing I noticed was this one actually printed it out as if it was a book, so it's got like title and chapters. But when I was playing around with it earlier, I actually got some pretty good results. So here's that pizza thing that I kept talking about. It's not an amazing thing, but you'll see that because it's a large language model, it's pretty unpredictable. So it won't be perfect with the formatting, but here's where it didn't actually print it out as a book. In here, it actually just looks like it's a thread. So your mileage may vary, and you can change what appears by creating a stricter prompt. But this is the basics of it. So now you know how to create a Twitter bot. And as always, all the code is going to be on GitHub with all the dependencies, all the run instructions. So yeah, have fun coding. See you next time.